Well, dear reader, I think it's time I speak directly to you. First of all, I appreciate you listening to my story. Secondly, feel free to interrupt. If you had been here in this room with me, you would have interrupted, I hope, in that last episode that I told you, because I made a mistake 3 times, I think. I got the names Violet and Elaine mixed up. And I finally straightened it out. Well, I'm telling this story. I'm going to get things like that wrong. And please, I'll correct myself sometimes I won't. But feel free to comment, as I say, even interrupt. Well, going on with the story, um, Lance was asleep. The two women, the woman and the girl, were watching. They sat and watched. What Violet did was she went off and got a weaving that she was doing. She had several real strong, what do you call them, screw hooks in the ceiling, and she could suspend this artwork from the ceiling. You see, I call her weaving. Violet was an artist craftsman, not just an artist, not just a craftsman. She was an artist craftsman in all kinds of ways. She was highly respected for that in the community of Richland. She had artworks on public display. The last medium that she'd been working with had been steel, of all things. Have big steel sculptures. I mean, she was in retirement, but she was there welding and scraping and doing that. But she had shifted now back to a medium she'd used earlier. She was working in wood and fiber, yarn of various kinds. And so that's what she went and got her work and was working on that. She could adjust the height. And so that gave her something to do while she was keeping an eye on Lance. There's more I need to tell you about her craftsmanship, but that's enough for now. Now, for Elaine's part, she did a little bit of that, but she wasn't as devoted to craftsmanship as her Gmail was. But what she did was she read. But that would give you a wrong idea, because there's some amazing things to be told about Elaine. I suggested that school wasn't working out for her very well. Well, it wasn't because she wasn't smart. She was plenty smart. But she read slowly. She didn't like to read fast. She liked to read at the speed that someone would speak. She was very comfortable with that. But that didn't work in school. And so, since she was such a slow reader, people began to think, well, maybe she was slow in general. She wasn't. So I think that was part of the problem with her in school. She was just being pressed to read faster than she wanted to. She would read something and think about it for a while and then go on. Another thing to tell you about her and her reading, by choice, she read poetry, but not just any old poetry. She liked poetry that told stories. She had a little book called Story Poems, thick, that was a collection of all kinds of famous narrative poems. And she liked to read that, and she'd read them over and over again too, even though she basically could memorize them. If a story was in poetry, she really only ever had to read it once or hear it once, and she basically knew it. If it got her attention. If it was no good, she might forget it. If it was sung, that's something I need to tell you about her too. She was almost like an idiot savant with that. She never forgot a tune or a lyric of a song that she heard sung if it got her attention. It was just automatic. So there were some very different things about her. So she sat there and read. And now, she was basically finished with her schooling, but she was reading by choice now. And what she had found was that she really liked to read, well, narrative verse, but the older stuff. She'd tried Chaucer. Now, Chaucer was hard, but she had trouble with him because of the Middle English, but she still read it. She had read some Spenser, which is almost as hard as that. She was working her way up, and of course she had an easy time with Thoreau or Coleridge, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. She'd read those and she loved them, and she didn't mind reading them over again. Another thing she would read, she was into the story and the beautiful language, but the stories. It would be her great-grandfather, Violet's father, had a collection of classics illustrated comic books that came down to her. So she had them. And she liked those fine. It was a complete set. So she'd read all the classics, knew the stories. She hadn't read the words because she was a slow reader. She'd get around to that in good time. So she had something to do. At present, she was working her way through some Tennyson. She just discovered Tennyson with his stories and his blank verse, the way he wrote. As a matter of fact, she was reading through Idylls of the King. You might have heard of that. That's what she was reading at the time. So she had something to do. But she also would sit there and think about it a long time. And sort of passed the evening, because Lance showed no evidence of waking up. He was sleeping, like they say, like a baby. He was sleeping so soundly, he didn't even stir. Finally, Violet decided that, she'd probably go to bed. Well, Elaine decided she was not going to leave their patient alone. What if he woke up at night and didn't know where he was, couldn't get up? So she went and got an air mattress and some blankets and set up a bed on the floor beside the couch. And that's where she decided she would stay. Well, Violet went to bed and everything quieted down, and the first one to wake up in that household the next morning was Violet. And she came down and found there the two were sleeping just as they had been before.